What is up, everybody? Svend here. We're going to be tying the creeper bug. I'm using new material by F&F, it's a creeper dub, but this is probably one of the more simpler patterns, and I haven't tested it yet, but it sure seems super effective. I love this TP650. It's a bent streamer hook. I'm going to tie it so it rides inverted. Naturally, when you strip it, it's going to flip. However, I'm going to weight it with a little bit, some lead eyes here in a size medium. This is a size 2 hook, and so medium is about as heavy as I want to go. And we're using, of course, some simplifies and a nano silk and a 6/0. This is wanting to be super durable, to be dragged in the shallows, targeting carp, bass, among trout and other species that would love to just have their lip pierced. So I'm going to start my thread right behind the eye, work my way up into the bend, laying down a nice little thread base, and then advance my thread right to the bend. We'll cut out the tag end, and where I want these eyes, I don't want it to sit on the top of the shank at this point, just right in front. And so I'm going to secure it, just having it parallel, and then 2 wraps, twisting it, kind of adjust it to where I want it, making sure it's right there in front of the bend, almost so that the top of this barbell lies even with the bend. But we'll just go ahead and secure that with some crisscrossing wraps, making sure that it's perpendicular. And then we'll do some over-unders to really tighten those crisscross wraps, and then of course we will advance our thread back to the bend. Like I said, this is going to be one of the probably the more simpler patterns that I fish, primarily because it's one that I think is going to be ultra effective. I haven't tested it yet, but for this one we're going with kind of an olive. This is the Sculpin Olive, this Fish Hunter Marabou. Excellent product. The packs are just loaded with loads of awesome feathers, especially for tails and streamer bodies. I love this, and I'm going to go ahead and just trim out the tip here just to create a little bit of a more even tail, and also the stem will, that kind of manipulates the marabou so it doesn't flow freely, and so that's why I like to trim that out. And I'm going to check this feather out. You can see that the bulk kind of ends, and then you've got these whispers there towards the end. And so I want the tail, the bulk of the tail, to be roughly the overall length of the hook. I'm going to make this, it's going to have a little bit of a larger body, and so I want to make sure that the tail compensates for that length. And I'll go ahead and palmer this marabou all the way up to right behind the eyes. And like I said, we're trying to build up a little bit of a bulkier body. And then we'll just kind of clean that up with some nice tight securing wraps as I advance my thread back towards the bend. And then I always like to do a few, they're not super tight wraps right here, but about 3 or 4 kind of looser wraps, just snug fitting, just to kind of place that tail on the top and make sure we're not going to snap any of the fibers. And then with most of my buggers and leeches, I love to secure this body with a little bit of a super glue. This is the Z-ment. I'll put a little bit too much there on the eyes. You usually just put a little glob. This is a new bottle, and so a little bit more came out than I wanted. But for this, here we go. We're almost done with this fly. This is the F&F Creeper. This is the color olive. It comes in a few different colors. I'm primarily tying these for, right now, carp is on my mind. But there's a lot of species I see that this would be super beneficial, especially those that are feeding on the bottom, like a bass or trout. And so I'm going to be tying them up in a bunch of different colors, olive, black, purples, browns in particular. And I'm going to tie this in a little differently. I'm going to have it take up about half the body there. I just want to make sure that it's nice and secure on here. Whenever I'm toying with the new material, I've given this a few stretch tests, and it seems pretty durable. And then I'm going to basically just palmer this up. I mean, it's got the rubber legs, it's got the core. I don't know what the core of this is, but it's kind of like a fuzzy fiber, and that's it kind of looks like a egg material, but however, I don't know how it's going to float, sink, how it's going to react. But when I put those lead eyes on, I know it's going to get to the bottom every time. And so I'm just going to try not to trap as many of these rubber legs as possible. And as I'm wrapping this around, I'm being careful not to pull too tight on this material. But you can see how this is just creating an ultra buggy body, almost maybe a little too dense. However, you could always go lighter by spacing out these wraps, of course. And so we'll go ahead and get right here behind the lead eyes, I'll try and do 1 or maybe 2 wraps right here behind the eyes, and then as I bring it up and over, I'm going to cover the wraps on my dumbbell eyes right there. Just bring it right there, and then I'll go ahead and tie that off, and you can see how I'm kind of separating this fuzzy material from the core right there as I stretch it. So you want to be a little bit careful when you're tying this. And then if you trap a few of these rubber legs when you're closing this off, I'm doing kind of a clouser nose on it, but I kind of want to orient these so they're primarily going back, and if we have to use our thread to force them to go back, that's okay too. And so what I'll do is I'll just pull all those materials back, and I'll work my way up, kind of building up a nice little nose. And then right here I'm going to really use my bobbin tip to work in between those lead eyes, and that's why I like these particular eyes, because they're almost like 2 cones off the side. So right now my thread's being sucked to the middle as I advance my thread backwards, and it's just really kind of creating a really nice durable, trapping that material that we tied off. And if you got any stragglers, just go ahead and trim them out, making sure not to cut your thread. But that is pretty much the fly. I'm just going to clean this up a little bit more, maybe build up a little bit of a bigger cone, and then we'll just do a 3-turn whip finish. And the last step is the resin. So this is a super fast pattern, if you want to even call it that. This almost seems too simple. You basically have a marabou tail with this FNF material as the body, and the color combinations could be endless. You could even put flash in the tail. You could put a marabou head on the front. I'm super stoked to really test this out. I really just want to see how it reacts just by itself. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put 2 coats of resin on this to really kind of make it ultra durable, because this point is what gets hit the most. The particular reservoir I'll be fishing this in the still water, I fish a lot of rocks on the one side, and so I really want to make sure that if I have to give it a nice tug through a few rocks, that it's not going to come apart. And so we'll do 2 coats of the resin, and it also makes it look a little better for those Instagram posts or wherever you do displaying your flies. And we'll let that cure for 10 to 15 seconds. And then the last step is something you want to do with most of your flies that are bugger leech, something that has a lot of flowiness to it. You want to take a nice brush and brush it out. And I got one hair here that's bothering me. We'll see if I can brush it back, but I'm pulling some of this fuzzy fiber away from the body. It creates a little bit more of a profile. I think it will maintain its shape. The true test will be fishing this spring or summer, and hopefully that maybe there'll be a version 2 where I'll modify this. But this pretty much seems like a killer pattern as is. I have confidence in it, having not fished it, and so I'm just gonna, these legs are kind of bothering me. If you have that, just go ahead and trim it out. And that one kind of, yep, there we go. So there is the creeper bug, pretty much because I'm using a material called the creeper, and it looks super awesome. I'm tying it up in a bunch of colors. I love this hook. So tie some up for your own box, and hopefully they do well for you.